the standing orders, if I'm not mistaken, says that we must deal with the matters before that are brought to the House within 30 days of them being brought to the House, so that the job of this committee is to keep matters of integrity coming from the Integrity Commission current. And so that is certainly what I'd love to see happen. As they occur, we bring them to the committee, and they are reviewed and procedurally ensure that the procedures have been followed, and that the Commission themselves have complied with all the requirements and the provisions, and we in turn will have an opportunity to comment on how it has been handled. So I will not detain you beyond the time that is reasonable. Those are only the points I want to make at this stage. As we develop, I have another point that I would like to bring to the attention of the committee, and we can determine how we proceed with that. As I saw Reverend Thwaites and then MP Golding. No, absolutely. The Commission, we will share with you everything that is before us. But you're talking about the Commission, what they are investigating?
Chair.
Well, that's one of the procedural things we have to resolve.
Chair, I think it's important that we begin the process by looking at what the Act says is the role of this particular committee. I think that's so we don't get off on the wrong footing as to what we are about.
Right.
We have not had circulated to us in the folders a copy of the Act. And I don't think this committee can function without that. So I have mentioned it to the young lady, the orderly, who was handing out the folders. But I think that's essential. We need to look and see what it is this committee is supposed to be doing. I do not believe it is a role of this committee to get involved in pending investigations and pending work of the Commission. We are to be reviewing the effectiveness of the Commission through their annual reports and invigilating them on the issues that arise from their annual reports. And we need to see carefully to what extent this committee has responsibility for looking at the actual reports on investigations that have been done and have been tabled, to see whether that is also part of our terms of reference. Without having the Act, it's difficult to answer that question.
Well, if I'm, Minister Chuck?
Yeah. Chairman, I think the importance of the committee has to be borne in mind, especially in relation to the Section 53, where there is a sort of restriction on the publication of any complaint or investigation that the Commission is actually engaged in. So I suspect that why we decided to put this Oversight Committee is this is an opportunity for the Commission. Commissioners are the executive director to be able to come to Parliament, because this is where Parliament to say we're conducting 10 investigations or we're doing this investigation without going into detail, but at least to be able to give a report that they're conducting 10 investigations. We have completed 2, and a report will shortly be made, and then when the report is made, we can interrogate the report itself. But I would say, Chairman, that this Oversight Committee is the opportunity for the Commission and its directors to be able to bring the country up to date on what it is working on, its function. and could also complain to this committee, to chairman, of any challenges or concerns that it has, because then we can then take it back to the parliament and from the parliament to the cabinet. One area, chairman, I can bring up immediately is that when this bill was debated and passed in the House, it took a little while because there were many concerns whether this is the perfect bill. And I recall there are many persons who were saying that this bill need readjusting before we pass. But there some of the persons who are complaining about this bill now were actually the ones who were urging us to pass it as quickly as possible, urging me anyway, because even though this is not the perfect bill, to use the phrase, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So we passed the bill with the understanding, Chairman, that within 2 years, we would be re-examining the bill again. No, and in fact, it is actually in the Act, which is what I was looking for, where it does say that within 2 years, we shall be reviewing this bill. So one of the things, Chairman, that we must immediately look at is a committee to be set up to review the bill, and so we can get representation not only from the commissioners themselves, but also from the public at large, how we can improve the bill. So those are my opening comments here.
Well, I have, following on what you have said so far, the comments made, I would just like to read the language that was used in citing the committee, establishing the committee. The Oversight Committee will monitor and review the functions of the Integrity Commission. So I just wanted to pay particular attention to will monitor and review the functions of the Integrity Commission. Now that's a very wide-ranging and something that we should note very carefully, in my opinion. The report to both houses of Parliament on any matter relating to the performance of the functions of the Integrity Commission. To any matter relating to the performance of the Integrity Commission, and to review the annual report and any other report of the Commission and submit recommendations in relation thereto to both houses of Parliament. That's the basis, what should I say, the preamble to the establishment of the committee. So we should seek to interpret in precise language what is meant by the language that was used to frame the committee. The committee will also assess the effectiveness of the Integrity Commission. Look at the depth. To assess the effectiveness of the Integrity Commission and the appropriateness of its procedures, and convene and consider a report submitted to Parliament under Section 34 of the Integrity Commission Act within 30 days of such submission. So that we are not only here to simply review reports, but we are here to assess the effectiveness of the entire Commission. That's wide-ranging and very deep.
Yeah.
I'd be right with you, Mr. Warmington. The Integrity Commission is mandated to promote and enhance standards of ethics or ethical conduct for parliamentarians, public officials, and other persons by consolidating laws relating to the prevention of corruption and the award, monitoring, and investigating of the government contracts and prescribed licenses, and strengthen the measures for the prevention, direction, investigation, and prosecution of acts of corruption. I cannot think of anything I've read recently that is as profound.
Chairman,
Yes.
there's a wrong reference.
Oh, okay.
The reference to section 34
Yes,
in paragraph E
yes.
is not correct. I think it is because some amendments were made subsequent to when the bill was originally tabled, that wrong reference wasn't picked up and corrected.
Oh, I see.
We need to ask, I think we should ask the Attorney General's chambers to identify what this provision was intended to refer to, so we can see which reports we are supposed to be considering, because there are different reports in the Act. There are reports under section 36, which is where either House of Parliament requires the Commission to investigate a matter relating to an act of corruption.
Mm-hmm.
So section 36 contemplates that a House of Parliament can ask the Integrity Commission to initiate an investigation and to report on it. That is one, but there are also other reports which are initiated by the Commission's own work, which is a normal thing, which come to the Parliament. So I think we need to know which section 34, which provision section 34, and that's quite easy to identify, because in the original bill it would have referred to a provision which was probably renumbered in the passage of the bill through Parliament, and we could identify which one it is that we're supposed to be focused on, whether it's 36 or whether it is something, because as I said, there are other provisions that deal with reporting in the Act.
One of the things that I take, Minister Warmington had wanted to ask.
I know that Member Bunting will have something to say, but looking at the composition of the membership here, I don't see Member Bunting's name. I assume that Member Bunting has taken over the position that Dr. Morris Guy would have had.
No, you
so
weren't here.
the question I was going to ask the question, was it taken last week?
Yes.
In that case, we should have added to the file.
Well, you could have noted it
Yeah,
in the
that's what
file.
I'm saying. I wasn't here last week, so I was going to ask whether it was taken last
That's
week.
the danger of not attending Parliament,
I'm not arguing with you about that. I am saying that if that's the case, we should have added it, because I was going to ask if it was taken last week.
Yeah.
No, I was going to ask if it was taken last week. And if it was not done, then we'd have to do it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I was asking if it was taken last week. If it was not, then we'd have to do it correct,
Okay.
right away.
No, there's another aspect of this. I know. There's another aspect of this that I wonder if you would indulge me. It says here the Integrity Commission is mandated to promote and enhance standards of ethical conduct for parliamentarians, public officials, and other persons. I want to focus on other persons by consolidating laws relating to the prevention of corruption and the award, monitoring, and investigating of the government contracts and prescribed licenses, and strengthen the measures for the prevention, detection, investigation, and prosecution of acts of corruption.
What section are you reading from?
I'm reading from the actual documentation to put into force, to bring into force.
From this file here, or from the Act?
No, from my presentation, from the. No, I'm just saying that this is an official document in the Parliament. That's my presentation.
No, but it must have been based on...
When it was House approves appointment of Integrity Commission, Oversight Committee.
No, that's what you talk about your statement.
It was public, yes. My statement.
Your ministerial statement.
Not ministerial. My statement that was presented.
Well, I think it must have been based on something in the Act. Is there a corresponding section in the Act? I don't know if Ms. Curtis could...
Probably Ms. Curtis, you can help us out. I didn't create it out of my head. Yes.
I repeat what was said.
I suspect it was faithfully reproduced by the Jamaica Information Service.
No, well, what the request, the initial request for us to have a copy of the act before us.
Have you got it now? Have you got it?
The request was made. I think she's copying it, the young lady.
She's copying the...
I think she's responding. Member Golding and myself requested of her to provide a copy. I think she might be working on it now, but it would be useful.
We should have a copy of that.
Yes, it would be useful.
Where are the things that are sent to copy?
Chairman, if I may just clarify, Section 54 of the Act addresses where the Director of Investigations has made a report to the commissioners, and the commissioners then are obliged to submit it to Parliament for tabling. Now, those are the reports, for example, that were recently tabled on matters to do with Petrojam, etc., etc. Those are under Section 54, as opposed to the ones under Section 36, which are where Parliament directs or requires the Commission to investigate something. So I would like to be clear on which of those reports fall under our jurisdiction, because the ones that are reported under Section 54 may be a matter that is to be dealt with in a different way if it is not specifically covered by the standing orders as amended by the Act.
Well, I wonder if the clerk of the House could guide us.
Could we ask the clerk, Chair, if she could please ask the Attorney General's chambers to look at Standing Order 73D, paragraph E, and the reference in paragraph E of 73D, big D, paragraph E of 73D to Section 34 of the Act, and advise us what the correct reference ought to have been, so that we can identify which reports we are supposed to consider within 30 days.
Yes.
Right.
I think that is a reasonable request. And as soon as possible, we could have that, the response to that. That's agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I think I agree with Member Golding that it's quite likely that this was intended to be Section 36. And the reason it puts the obligation to review it within 30 days is because it would have been the House or Parliament itself that would have initiated those investigations, would have referred those matters for investigations. But 73D paragraph C is clear that the annual reports and any other reports of the Commission, which we have a number, I think we have at least 2 annual reports and some specific reports on Petrojam and maybe others that are already properly before this committee from 73D paragraph C. So I don't think there's anything that, I think it's important for us to get clarity, but I don't think there's anything that hinders us going ahead with what is already before us under 73DC, which is reviewing the annual, at least 2 annual reports, I believe, and the other reports of the commissions, the most recent being the Petrojam reports. But I would just ask one question for clarification.
Yeah.
We passed a resolution referring those reports that were tabled last week to this Oversight Committee. But given that the standing orders already provide for the committee shall have the duty of reviewing the annual report and any other reports of the Commission. Is that it seems to me similar to the PAC, to which the Auditor General's report is automatically referred. These reports would be automatically under the purview of the committee, since the Oversight Committee has the duty to review those. So it wouldn't seem to me that it would be necessary to have a resolution to refer those matters to this committee. I think they're automatically referred to the committee as written
I
here.
think so. I agree with you. I agree with you.
The whole question of the review of the Act, which the Act contemplates, should happen within 2 years. It may, for example, be convenient to have this committee play that role in the capacity of a review under that section of the Act, separate from the oversight provisions that is our main responsibility. Since we're going to be very familiar over time with the Act and have a working relationship with the Commission as to try and enhance its effectiveness and so on, the review of the Act could be done by a totally separate committee, but I would have thought it would make sense for the House to appoint the same members to be the committee that does the review of the Act itself, which we know is something that is on the front burner, given the public interest in some of the provisions that are already in the Act. So I'm just saying that it may make sense to just have the same body of persons be appointed as the committee to review the Act under section, what section is it, right?
Well,
that the review should be by both houses of Parliament. Okay. So we would have to expand this committee. Yeah. I have no problem with this committee being expanded to include members of the Senate.
For the review of the Act?
For the review.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, because, I mean, we would be duplicating and have another committee just to consider so basically I support that position, Chairman, that this committee's role in reviewing the work of the Integrity Commission, we should also entertain at a certain, almost immediately, how this Act can be improved, amended, adjusted, whatever, to make it more functional.
Yes, but Chair? Chair, I do think that we need to distinguish between our role as the Oversight Committee and the committee which is going to review the Act itself, which is a statutory function that the Act requires and which should include the Senate. So I think we don't want to mix up the two roles, because the Oversight Committee is a committee of the House and doesn't involve the upper house. So I think we should, when we are doing the review of the Act, we should meet for that purpose and deal with that separately from reviewing reports and so on, which is the role of this committee as an oversight body.
yes, go ahead.
What is clear from all that has been said is that there's much here to chew on and to consider. With respect to the workings, though, of the committee, the procedural, the matters before it, and which are those matters, the sources are varied. There are matters before the committee now that are properly presented, and I think even as we consider the other issues, including the review mechanism, and by the way, I support the suggestion that be an expanded committee, that there is already work for us to proceed on.
Yes, Mr. Reverend Waits.
Yes, thank you. My understanding, without the benefit of a study before me of the Act, is that the remit of this committee is to review and monitor the work of the Integrity Commission. The sentiment is expressed that that review will center around the reports of the Integrity Commission.
Both the annual reports and the reports on investigation.
Whereas the Standing Order 73C envisages a much wider function. 73D, excuse me. A, monitoring and reviewing the performance of the functions of the Integrity Commission, as you yourself said, Chairman. This is extremely wide. So, bear with me. So the Integrity Commission fails to report, for whatever good reason or bad reason, on a particular matter. Is that not of concern to this committee? If the report of the Commission concerns certain matters, but not other matters which are in the public domain, and that public, as you rightly said, is so anxious to know that this is a functional, effective committee, and not just simply a whitewash, then, or in current language, it should be a blackwash, eh? What exactly are our limits? I need to know. What questions do we ask of the Integrity Commission, and which other questions are we forbidden to do, or outside of our remit? There is ambiguity there which is going to affect us, and which we must clarify early on. There is enough, as Member Hilton says, already reported for us to bite into and continue. But the scope of this committee, is it restricted to the reports of the Integrity Commission, or is it broadly to question the Integrity Commission regarding their work and the actions that the public, who we are the representatives of, see as significant for the Commission to deal with?
Chair, it's both. As the paragraph set out, the broad questions are part of our remit, and we're also required to look specifically at the annual reports, which will cover some of those broad issues, and do, if you read the one that was tabled most recently, the second report, it goes into all questions of staffing, resources, how many reports they have, how many declarations they've been able to review, how many they haven't been able to review, how many prosecutions they've initiated. All of that is in there. So that is a good source of material for invigilating their effectiveness. And then there's separately now the reports that they table as a result of investigations that they've initiated. And we have a role to review those as well. Mm-hmm. The only thing I'd say,
may I just say, Chairman, that I agree that
I just wanted to finish. One more sentence, and then I'll hand over. So I think it's open season, so to speak, for us, except that I do not think we can be attempting to invigilate the Commission on matters that they are reviewing currently themselves, which are kind of sub judice, so to speak, within the Commission. That I think we do not. That is territory that we are not supposed to delve into. Yeah.
In fact, it would defeat one of the conditions
Correct.
Under which the present Director General was engaged, that whilst investigating, reports are not made, and to do it through the committee would be making it public.
No, I accept that totally, Chairman. In essence, my view of this oversight committee, take the term oversight. I have no doubt that the annual report, quarterly or monthly report that the Commission might have is something that they should submit to us for us to review. One would hope is not only an annual report, but maybe a quarterly report as to what reports they have completed, what areas they're investigating. But I don't think that this committee should be inquiring into what they're investigating, firstly. And secondly, when they make a report, be it a report completed, that this committee is going to interrogate them on that report. In other words, those reports, to my mind, go to the respective parliamentary committees, be it PAC, PAAC, internal and external committee. So I don't think, Chairman, if a voluminous report come to us, of 300 pages on sometimes 500 pages from the Integrity Commission, that when it comes to us, that we are going to interrogate the Commission on this report, because it would then be another investigation into that report. I would just say, it having been reported, then one would hope that the relevant other parliamentary committee would do that sort of interrogation as PAC, internal and external committee, the economic, all of those. But I don't think that this committee, but no, I'm not saying that we are not to ask one or two questions, how long it took you, of all the investigations being done and what have you. But to say we go and interrogate on a report which the PAC or the internal and external committee or the economic production committee, I don't know if that is a role.
Hold on, Mr. Chuck, are you finished? Yes. All right.
What Member Chuck is speaking to, I think, is what approach the committee would use or follow in fulfilling its duty to review that report. And I think we would have to be guided as to the appropriateness of a particular, for example, one would expect that coming out of a report, there may be recommendations on what they would like to see happen, whether it be administratively in a particular public body, or maybe even reports about gaps in the law. There may be things in that report where the Commission is making certain recommendations. One of the things we would do, I think, is to ensure that those recommendations are followed up, that the appropriate agencies are aware of them, and we could ask those agencies what they're doing about it. That sort of thing, I think, would be appropriate for us, as opposed to trying to delve behind the findings of fact that might have arisen in the report. I don't think that we would be going into that.
I think I get the view that you're expressing clearly. One of the things that we, Minister Chuck, have to be mindful of is that no matter how large a report is, and if in terms of the business world, you have an executive summary, and the executive summary guides the discussions, because very few executives have time. Warren Buffett doesn't go beyond a page. Very few people have time to go and review a book in order to attend a meeting. So the value in an executive report is the way in which it is presented and the extent to which it hits all the points that need to be raised for appropriate decision to be made. Good. So I think we would, by force, per force, be required to ask of the Integrity Commission to provide us with an appropriate executive report that would guide us in our deliberations. The lawyers, of course, have a natural, like yourself, inclination to go deep and to drill deep and spend a lot of time on the slightest detail. I myself abhor the thought. So what we can do is have a combination of both. What I'm going to recommend now, if you don't mind, so that we know exactly how to go about it, and I'm not a man that believes in large committees. So I'm going to suggest, would it be of any value if we established a subcommittee of this commission, this committee, and draw from it the expertise available to us in it, to go through the differences in terms of the acts and the provisions in each that relate to what we are to do, and define in as clear language as is possible a procedure as to what we will deal with and the extent to which we will be required to deal with that. I don't anticipate that's going to be a long, drawn-out thing.
Sure. I think that there are some clear things that we need to address, and I think what we should be discussing is the sequence with which we enter on the reference of those things. The Commission has prepared 2 annual reports. We have an obligation to review those reports. The second of them was only recently, I think within a week or so was tabled. The first one was, I think we should look at that, and I think we should ask them to attend so we can ask them questions about that. Secondly, there are other reports that they have tabled which we have an obligation to review. How we go about that review is what we were just discussing. Member Chuck and myself had an exchange on that. I think there's some consensus that it's not about going behind and re-investigating those investigations.
No, I just want to know what the purpose of what I suggested was to determine what acts or what sections of the acts that will guide our procedures. That's what I'm trying to determine. Well, I think that is what we have suggested, that we could ask Parliament to get advice on as to what... From who?
From the chambers. Or legal.
Well, the Attorney General is in this committee.
Yes, but she's not here.
I was going to suggest that a subcommittee chaired by her would guide us tremendously.
I don't think we need...
We don't need to have a discussion in here with all these people talking about
I know, Chair. All I'm saying is...
It paragraph and that paragraph...
Chair, it's fairly elementary legal work for somebody to go through the statute, see what the issues are that the commission... Sorry, the committee...
So you'd rather us refer to her for an independent advice to us?
A memo on the topic.
An advice to us?
On the topic, yes.
On the topic?
Yes.
All right, so okay, AG, are you in compliance with that? Your agreement with that?
So what the Act says we
Because there is some doubt as to precisely where the jurisdiction of the committee, what aspects of the law it is obliged to focus on, and the extent to which it can be involved in determining what is our primary objective, and that is to go to the root of corruption. And through what vehicle, what is the best vehicle to be utilized to achieve the results we require. And I was going to suggest, because as you walked in, a subcommittee chaired by you as Attorney General to interpret that. But the member Golden has suggested that just a reference to you, having the matter referred to you for purposes of determining that as a guide to us, the chambers would provide that.
The AG doesn't have to do that work herself. If she,
no, the chambers, not her personally.
Yeah.
Chairman, just to say that the functions designated to the committee are set out in the amendment to the standing order. And I do believe that they're quite clear and simple. And perhaps a starting point is to look at how the commission, the establishment of the commission, the resources that have been made available to it, the concerns that have been raised by the commission, and whether, as is now, it is put at a place to adequately discharge its function. I think as a starting point, a basic starting point.
All right, you want to guide me to the amendments to the standing order?
Right, so...
Is that what you just got?
Right, so the committee is to monitor and review the performance of the functions of the Integrity Commission. Right.
I just got it.
We are also to report to the Houses of Parliament on any matter relating to the performance of the functions of the Commission. Right, so set out there. And I think those are simple and clear. Right.
The reference to 34 is incorrect.
Right.
It's 36.
At section 34.
Right.
We think it's 36. Whether that was the original reference. I think
so
it's
are the members satisfied that the amendments, the amendments are sufficient to guide our deliberations?
Absolutely. And
sure, Reverend Faith.
We comply with the rubric of the law, of course, but that we are also mindful of public perception about the issue of corruption and the role of this committee. There is a strong public perception that this is an issue which is insufficiently attended to, and that the Integrity Commission, which I have absolutely no criticism, it is felt that sometimes they are inattentive or dilatory. in matters that appear important to the public, and their concern, the public concern is that the parliamentarians are, in a sense, sitting as judges in this committee and in the whole houses of themselves. And therefore, it is expected of us that we be as penetrative as possible of the work of the Commission. And it is important because the issues that will come before us, referred to by the Integrity Commission, go to the very heart of public trust in governance in this country. And if it appears that we are being restrictive, overly restrictive, then, or if we do not fulfill all of the various functions set out in the amendments to the standing orders, yes, then we will be doing them a disservice and ourselves a dishonor. We have to be extremely mindful of the purpose, the ultimate purpose of this entire enterprise.
Mrs. Philibert?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's important to recognize and for us to establish what is the scope of the committee, but certainly it cannot be, I don't think, and I hope not, that we are being used as a body to investigate what has been already investigated by the Integrity Commission. No, I'm just saying, to be clear, that I do not think, I know what the public concern is, and that is what the Integrity Commission is there to do, and to raise the bar in relation to that. But as a committee, I hope it isn't that we are, right, that I'm just being very careful and I think, I hear you, Member Bunting, but I think it is very important that we understand as a committee that we are not here to investigate what has already been investigated, because the whole idea of the Integrity Commission is to lift the bar and to bring things to public attention.
Let me just support
Go ahead,
what Reverend Thwaites is saying. It's very important that we should recognize that the Integrity Commission should be able to come here and explain to us what constraints, challenges, or issues they have, because the country is dependent on the Integrity Commission to wipe out, reduce whatever corruption as much as possible. And if they're failing in their duty, and we can say, well, we don't think you're doing your duty properly, so why are you not doing your duty properly? Tell us, what are the constraints? Is it resources? Is it that we have shackled them by Section 53? Is it that, they need more time to report to us? Because I see the Oversight Committee Chairman as the opportunity for the Integrity Commission to air its concerns, and in hearing its concerns, whatever it might be.
Yeah,
so that
agree.
is my view, Chairman. I would hope that when we meet, which could be regularly, the Commission can in fact tell us what work they're doing so the country knows that they're working.
Thank you, Mr. Chuck. One of the things we must try to avoid, we must major in the obvious.
Yes, thank you. Chair,
it is obvious that's what we are here to do. So reiterating it doesn't strengthen it.
Chair, may I suggest?
What I would like,
I
think Minister... Member Bunting has been trying to get my attention for a long time. Go ahead, Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, finally. I don't think the government members need to be fearful that we are trying to turn this into a public accounts committee or a PAAC. And, I'm sure my friend from Trelawney South isn't fleeing where no one is pursuing. This is not an investigative type of committee. We're not going to call witnesses outside of the Integrity Commission itself. This is an oversight committee of the Integrity Commission and its operations. This is not to oversight or to attempt to direct its investigations or prosecutions. That's not the nature of this committee. In reviewing reports, of course we can ask questions right around that, or for clarification of anything that we might, that might be necessary. And I'm sure the commission will be, or the representatives of the commission will know what lines not to cross in terms of things which may be going forward for prosecution, etc. In fact, if we look at their reports, there are sections of their reports which have been redacted before being tabled in Parliament, and I assume that is because it could be prejudicial in some way to further action which is going to be taken. So I don't think we have to, overthink this one. It's quite clear in terms of the reference. We are monitoring and reviewing the performance of the functions of the Integrity Commission. What we want to hear is from the Integrity Commission itself, and much of it, I think, is set out in their annual reports, and particularly the one from last year is we're a year overdue in reviewing it, and I don't think we should delay by setting up any further subcommittees of the committee. I think it's quite straightforward.
No, well, we're past that. We're going to give it to the
I think it's quite straightforward, and I think we should just enter upon the reference.
Okay.
Wait, Chairman, can I just ask that could we get a copy of each member, get a copy of the first annual report? Because we got the second annual report, so we don't need that again. But if we could get a copy of the first annual report, so that I think maybe the first line of business would be to invite the commissioners here and we go through the first and second annual reports. There may be some issues which are repeated in the second, so it might not all be.
Why don't we? Why don't we do it this way? Before presuming what is in the first annual report, why doesn't somebody review it? Parliament yourself, or on both sides, review it and then determine.
It's our job to review it,
and
Chair.
then determine the basis on which we invite them. Simply just to say, come and review the first report.
No, it's our obligation to read it, and then we can ask them questions on it.
Well,
we can invite them to.
Suppose after you read it,
yeah, you
don't find that the content rise to the level that requires their attention.
I've already read it and it does.
So you are not contemplating what might be. You know what
I
is.
know what I've read the second one over the weekend. The second
and
so
you've read both. So you've read both.
I haven't read the first. That's why I'm asking if we could get a copy of the first. Yeah.
Well, okay, we can do that. Except, I rather thought that it was the intention of this committee to move forward as expeditiously as possible, which would have had greater emphasis placed on the second report rather than the first. Because remember too that the Commission has been handicapped to a great degree, because there were times when there was no executive director.
Sure, we're not going to get
and so we don't want to get ourselves bogged down in something that would just be preoccupied with things that are...
Things which have become irrelevant, we don't need to focus.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. It must be relevant.
There may be things raised in the first report which have not yet been addressed. So I'm just saying we need to read the first report and decide what it is in there, if anything, that is worthy of discussing now.
All right, well, let's put it this way. Before we make that determination, I'd like everybody to be fully seized of what is in the first report. Once we know exactly, because you have us at a disadvantage. You are the only person in here, perhaps, who has read.
But Mr. Chairman, with respect, I don't want it to appear that you're attempting to frustrate the work of the committee. All of us have a responsibility to read the reports. And we come here. We don't have to come here to talk to each other again. We want to ask this question, but the people are not there. When we come, we will have read the reports. We will have received the first one between now and the next meeting, which can be in 2 weeks' time. And when we come prepared with our questions. I have already read the second report, and like the member from South St. Andrew, I have further questions to ask on that. So we don't have to wonder whether we will have questions to ask the Commission. We know there are going to be questions. We know there will be issues we want to explore with them. So at the next opportunity, I think Public Accounts Committee is next week. So at the next opportunity, we invite the representatives of the Commission to come and we review the report with them exactly as set out in the standing orders.
No.
Chairman, I just am anxious to respond to my friend. I am not fleeing where no one is going. The fact is, the very discussions that we are having here in this morning, just a minute, perception is 3/4 of the game. And we are, in any event, speaking to the public at large. So we have to put it as simply and as plain. There are some things that we're asking about. What is the scope of the committee and so. So I'm just saying, I'm not going where we're not going. I'm just saying, out of an abundance of caution and perception is 3/4 of the game.
All right. I think that...
May I make a suggestion? Could we ask the clerk if this afternoon or tomorrow afternoon, if we could get the first report? I think I have the first report, but other members can get the first report. And then having got the first report, we set a meeting where we invite the commissioners and the directors to be here, and we query them on the 2 reports.
So let's ask them to circulate the first report.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
But gentlemen, let us not keep repeating the same thing over and over. It does not strengthen the case. I am a person get very impatient with repetition. So please, indulge me. The situation is that a request has been made for us to start the process by reviewing the first report. No, the first report. If we can review the first report first, right? At the completion of that review, then we go to the second report, because the first report will deal with matters outside of the specifics that may be contained in the first. So we will use the first as a learning curve moving into the second report.
Chairman.
Yes.
The suggestion here is that, from Member Golden, that maybe there are things in the first report that are not relevant. So the areas of relevance, then we deal with it. And there are no reason we can't take both reports at the same time. Because you may not have a whole lot of things that you need to question about. So we'll deal with both reports at the same time. We'll find relevance that we need to review.
If we don't finish, we continue.
We'll come back another day.
We are going to convene the next meeting to deal with the first report. Full stop.
Can you take a decision? Chairman, this is not something where the chairman makes decision for the committee. The chairman chairs the committee. The decisions are taken by the members.
And that is the sentiment being expressed.
No, the members take the decision.
Sentiment.
No, yes, that we review both.
If we don't finish it first,
We'll go back to the meeting.
so we do both.
Yes.
Committee.
I suggest that the sentiment expressed by the body is that both report. There may be things in the first that are irrelevant and a few things that are relevant. We address those and move on.
Yeah.
Yes, and go both.
I have, look here, let me get it clear. I have no objection to taking all the reports that are before us. I have no problem with that. What I don't want is I don't want what has transpired in the first report to prejudice what is in the second report. No, I have no evidence that it won't. No.
There can be no question about prejudice.
No.
Chairman,
I have
Chairman, that's
there is
the wrong
no
word. I want to suggest.
There is
That's
no
the wrong
evidence.
word.
Hold on,
Nothing
member.
can be prejudice.
Hold on. There is no evidence before us that it may be speculative, but on the basis of speculation, success will attend us at times. what I am saying here is, we will start with the first report. You can bring the second. If we get through the course of studying the first, we want to go on to the second, fine. No, hold on a minute. But remember, I know I've seen this type of committee in action. I've chaired this kind of committee. And I know that once we start, the length of time it is going to consume is not going to leave us much to deal with the second report. But anyway, if that is your will and your wish, we will present the two reports, but we will start with the first report. All right. I'd like to reference for you a statement by the chairman of the commission. And in that statement, it is contained in the second report. And it is a statement worth reading. He makes reference to a specific instance which was the subject of publication in the newspaper. I think only yesterday or perhaps today. I read it over the last few hours. Philanthropy and how it should be treated. He made specific reference to the treatment of that. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm referring it to you. Why are you being contentious? I'm simply referring a document to you. And read it, and we can comment on it when we come to dealing with it. You understand what I'm trying to say? Because like you, I think it is, I'm not sure where the authority is vested. So you see, and hold on, and that's the second report, and we are going to go to the first. So I think we'll get along just fine. Yes. Mine have. Committees of Parliament are open, and all persons wishing to make a presentation to the committee is welcome. That is the way that the Parliament is operated. So it goes without saying that if someone has a contribution to make, that they'll be welcome to come and make it without restriction, as long as they comply with the rules and regulations of Parliament.
So may I suggest, Mr. Chairman, that again, in order to reasonably satisfy public concerns about these matters, that the Parliament may wish to advertise or otherwise inform the public that submissions on the issues of the reports of the Integrity Commission would be entertained. I think we should be proactive in that regard.
Well, the very fact that you are saying it here is enough publicity, because I believe isn't this committee being carried? Is it? Is it being carried by the media? Pardon? No. Okay. But it will be known.
The point I'm making, Chairman, is that, let me just be specific. There are groups like National Integrity Action.
There are no members of the media here? I didn't say anything about it, but I would find that very strange.
No, it's live.
Oh, it's live. Okay, fine. I think it will be well publicized by the time.
There are groups like National Integrity Action, Jamaicans for Justice, and I have no doubt others whose wisdom, whose thoughts on this matter would be of on these matters would be of benefit to us. And I think it is in the appropriate. It doesn't derogate from the supremacy of Parliament and its committees to be very open and receptive of the submissions of the public, and I encourage it.
We'll look at it,
Chairman.
and see how best to
No,
accommodate
Chairman.
any kind of involvement of
Chairman.
that nature.
Chairman, the purpose of the committee is an oversight committee of the Integrity Commission. The National Action, what and those. Now, fall on this committee, I don't see how they can assist us. We are dealing with the report and review oversight of the Integrity Commission, so I don't see why we should bring them into this. I don't see why they brought in this. The other thing I want to bring up, Mr. Chairman, another issue I want to speak on at the closing, the issue of our returns, annual returns and declaration. Government officers, employees at a certain level of earning are required to make annual declaration and returns to the Integrity Commission. Where the Integrity Commission is concerned, to whom do they make the annual report or declaration? That's one thing we need to find out or look into.
That's your kind of issue.
Yes, if they, all declaration, go to this commission. So, this, where does the report or declaration from members, where do thank you. Everyone who earns must make a declaration, of course. Therefore, they can't declare to themselves. Therefore, a mechanism has to be established that the directors and the employees and all within that make declaration as required by law.
Well, I'd like to read the opening paragraph of the chairman's comments. The Integrity Commission Act was not designed to deal with the activities of parliamentarians and public officials only. It refers also to quote-unquote other persons. That's specifically the point I made when I started. That which I read. The Commission interprets this as meaning that all persons in the society are involved. In that regard, the Commission accepts the need to educate not only parliamentarians but public officials, but also the public at large on the purpose of the legislation and the Commission's mandate. So what that is saying is that, yes, everybody who is, and further it goes on to speak about persons who offer themselves for public service must be held accountable. And any attempt to use any type of influence in the discharge of their responsibilities to benefit themselves personally is objectionable and will attract the attention of the investigation of the Integrity Commission. So I have no doubt at all about that, member, that it will be it's a requirement.
Requirement? No, you're talking about investigation. No, I'm saying you have not addressed the issue I've raised as to the declaration of the members, the directors of the Commission, and those earning.
But they would have to.
Who are they going to declare to? That's a question. They can't declare to themselves. Well, so I'm saying a mechanism must be established where their declarations are made. To whom? The Auditor General is a part of it. So she can review it. She has to be reviewed also. So that's what I'm talking about. This is something we have to look at. This is something that was never looked at or considered before. And may I say also, And the issue is, I believe that everyone.
But wouldn't it be possible for them to submit it to the Integrity Commission?
But is the Integrity Commission?
Not to a person.
No. The Integrity Commission is going to submit its declaration to the Integrity Commission. Don't you see conflicts of interest there? Don't you see conflict of interest? They can't.
Wouldn't the executive director, if required, to submit his returns
to whom?
To the commission.
They're part of the commission.
He's the executive director of the commission.
No. But what about, but he oversees the entire staff.
But the commission is a live entity.
He will influence his review.
No, that's another matter.
So what I'm saying, even the directors, don't they earn above the threshold for declaration? So thank you. They earn, huh? That's what I'm saying. This committee, that is the oversight committee, have to establish a mechanism whereby declarations are made by all and sundry inside here.
Could you assist us,
Chairman,
Attorney General?
May I just assist? Perhaps one of the questions that we could ask of the Commission when they get here is whether they make statutory declarations and to whom do they make it, and whether they would consider it appropriate for the members who are, because not all members are public servants, you know. The Commission is comprised in a particular way. It's the Auditor General really who would be a public servant who would be liable to make the statutory declaration, because the Commission is comprised of different persons. Yeah. Right, and then you have the staff. No, I mean, so the question is in respect of members, commissioners and members of the Commission who are liable to make statutory declarations, how are those dealt with by the Commission, and whether there are any issues of conflict, perceived or real, and hear their own suggestion as to what could and should be in place, whether amendments are required. That's one. All right.
The Integrity Commission is a commission of Parliament, isn't it? Right. Mr. Chairman, you were on the Electoral Commission. Those commissioners, do they make annual declarations?
I imagine they do.
No, you were there. Did you make from there? Mr. Bunting was there also, so you should know the commissioners make declaration.
Everyone has to make a declaration.
To Parliament. Every commission. From parliamentary stuff you do it. But remember, you have the commissioners, don't know, retired judges and all of those.
No,
do they make declaration as to their earnings?
Wait, no, just
hold on, they earn 12 or 10 million per year on all of those.
Let me help you. When I was there, every commissioner had to make a statutory declaration. But they still, and that means all the persons who serve on the commission make a statutory declaration.
Someone, the act defines the public officials, you know. It's any person holding an executive, an administrative or a judicial office, or a parliamentarian, whether appointed or elected, whether permanent or temporary, or whether paid or unpaid. Secondly, any other person who is employed to a public body, yes, whether paid or unpaid. Any member of the security forces, and then the security forces are defined to mean the JCF, the JDF for rural police. I think we'll have to find a way to include MOCA in that regard, because whether security forces, but to specifically cover them. And then the judicial officers are defined. Right. Chief Justice, President of the Court, Judge of Appeal, Registrar of the Court of Appeal, Judge of the Supreme Court, it sets it out. But parish judges, yes, Judge of the Parish Court, yes.
We'll find
but Chairman, it may be a little helpful to just remind ourselves of what the functions of the Commission are. And so...
I think we went through that, you know.
Oh, that has already, we've gone through that.
I would say that we are at a point where we can set the date for the next meeting.
Okay. So you went through the functions of the Commission?
I'm always in conflict with the chair of the PAC because he has commandeered this
We
facility.
meet fortnightly typically now, Mr. Chair, so
But
we're
between
meeting next
between
week.
yourself and the PAAC.
PAC
there's no
is meeting
room.
next week Tuesday, so we could meet the following Tuesday, which would give us a little time to read the annual
So
report.
give me the date that you recommend.
The 21st, I'm suggesting the 21st for us.
21st is not available.
Why?
Joint Select Committee on the Banking Act. Again, it
The
falls,
Banking Act?
it falls on the opposition.
The Bank of
spokesman
Jamaica
on
Act.
Finance.
Huh?
What is it? What committee is it? Yours? Is it your committee, Mark?
I don't know which committee, which act. No, there's no Banking Act committee. There's a Bank of Jamaica Act, Joint Select. Is that a...
Dr. Clark's committee? Bank of Jamaica Act. So we won't be able to. So we go the week after that?
We are both on it, and we have not even been told of that meeting. That meeting has not been notified to us. That committee has not met for months.
All right, so let us
we
make
are
a
on that
decision.
committee and no meeting has been set.
I
No
see.
date has been set for the next meeting, so we can take that date.
So if there isn't, then how you got it? Whose schedule is that? Who is the committee unit? Where is that person? Well, I think Member Warmington, the meeting has a chairman. And I would appreciate if you comply with the rules of meetings of this kind. If you have a matter to discuss, refer it to the chairman. Yes, we are talking about matters concerning scheduling of meetings. So we will deal with it. The 21st? All right. 21st, it's agreed. 10 a.m. Okay? Well, I want to... Well, I gathered so because it gives us time to go into Parliament. Huh? Okay. So, all right, it's agreed. 21st. I think this was a good meeting. Thank you all very much. And yes. So I move for the adjournment. Agreed. Thank you all for your help. I think we'll get along just fine.